Good morning. All across North America, leadership in changing times, becoming a community builder. Next competency. We just came out of catalysts for responsibility. How do we engage others? And we just finished talking about pride. Pride. And I just want to make a quick point on this whole idea. Because on the surface, and we would have talked about it in a coaching session, because we would have had the coaching session and then those 3 emails. But you look on the surface at this thing, pride, and you say to yourself, or some may say to themselves, well, what? Pride, a performance management strategy? That's a little trite. Or, you know, that's one of those warm and fuzzies. Well, if you go back to the original premise that the community builder, today's leader, today's executive leader, understands that the resources necessary to get things done are minimal at best, then we must have strategies that we can deploy that don't have a dollar attached to them. Pride is an intangible, but we can see it when it's in play. And whether that's individual pride, organizational pride, community pride, national pride, a team pride, what is that thing? I call it that magic force. Well, it's that thing inside a human being where they give their best when no one's around, where they give their best even though they may be in difficult circumstances, for no other reason than they want to give their best because that's who they are, or that's what they're aligned with, or that's who they represent. So I as a leader, you as a leader, we as community leaders, it's in my opinion, it's necessary, especially today, for us to be able to foster that. And whether we're speaking on community terms, get the guy to clean his front yard or take care of his kid, or go the extra mile with his neighbor because he takes pride in his community, or whether that's in our workplace, I give my best and try to find out and solve this problem that's in front of me because I take pride in my work and I take pride in my department. So it dawned on me, and I'm sure it has dawned on you somewhere along the way, that that force was good to have around, right? And usually most people's strategy for the development of that force is to hire people that already have it. Right, Jeff? Let's just hire people that already have it. Well, when you look societally, the institutions that used to teach that thing and instill that thing are fractionalized at best. And whether that was the family unit, or whether that's the faith-based organizations, or whether that's the schools, or whatever it is, participation in athletics. I'm not talking about elite athletics. I'm talking about just participation in athletics. You know, that's on the decline significantly. So all of these things that we could count on to build pride aren't there. Even to things like this, the crest for my family, or the monument in the middle of my community, or whatever. Those things that built pride, there was an intentional exercise to build pride, collective and individual. Well, those things are gone. So the idea that, or fractionalized at best, so the idea that you're going to be able to just hire that is unlikely. So now it's our responsibility, it seems to me, that I've got to cultivate that. And then I've got to deploy it as an intentional strategy. Because I'm going to get more. I'm going to get more. That person who takes extreme pride in what they do and in their department is always going to give me more. More talent, more time, more effort, more energy. So I hope you'll thoughtfully consider some of the stuff that was discussed there. I got a couple of people that sent me emails of some examples that they were doing in their community, and I'm going to post a couple of them on the director's thing, a couple of examples of what other communities are doing. You might want to take a look at that. Okay, enough with that. What are we talking about now? Next competency. So remember, you're a community builder. You know bridges, you know roads, you know water, you know budgets, you know those things. But community building is that is that next piece of leadership for the public works executive leader, director, director, assistant director, and the like. This community builder. I got to look around at all of the human capital that's at my disposal, and I got to find a way to marshal it. And that's the human capital within my four walls and the human capital outside my four walls. I got to get alignment of all the human capital that's around me. And we've been talking about some various competencies that I believe will assist you in marshaling human capital, in leading today. So now we've come to the next one, the next competency. The next competency is about planning and marshaling the mental capital that's at my disposal. The dilemma that I faced when I became an executive leader was ideas, plans, solutions. How do I take complex and difficult situations and come up with effective solutions? Or how do I build strong strategic plans or budgets or sustainability plans or use plans or whatever? What's the best way to build the best plan? Because without a great plan, I'm not going to make it in difficult times. Planning becomes even more important when we're under duress or there's challenges, because everything's got to be so sharp and crisp. So it takes great planning. Now, the downside is, or the difficult part is, that in those dire times, it doesn't seem like we have time to plan. Well, I don't have any time to plan. Well, that's when you need to plan the most. So I sat down, and maybe you have as well, and I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way to get better plans. And I said, well, to myself, I said, well, then what's the dilemma? Why aren't the plans as good as they could be? Well, one of the dilemmas was the time piece, right? That I didn't have time. And me and my direct reports and my executive team, we didn't have time. So that was a downside. Another downside was we only had certain perspectives. We weren't on the ground. Benjamin Franklin, you've heard me say it before, Benjamin Franklin said, let the people closest to the problem solve their own problems, because they knew what was going on. So you don't have all the information. Admiral Yamamoto, he lost because of a lack of information. So you don't have all the information to build a solid plan. And then finally, I found that the challenge of ownership of the plan. So I could come up with the greatest idea in the history of mankind, but if the people who had to implement it didn't own it, they would sometimes be resistant to it on one end of the spectrum, all the way to sabotaging it at the other end of the spectrum. And whether they were passively sabotaging it or openly sabotaging it, they were sabotaging it. So I had to take those three dilemmas into account. Very common sense, very practical. I had to take those three things into account. So I said, there's got to be a better way to build plans that people will own. It'll be their plan, and they'll go and deploy it, and we'll have success. And that's when we came up with this idea of the engagement approach to planning as the next competency of an executive leader. Check this out. Today's leader has the capacity to implement planning models, an S left out there, obviously we didn't plan very well, has the capacity to implement planning models that engage and empower all stakeholders. So, you may have looked at the title and you may have looked at the description, you may have said, approach to planning. What? Planning. Well, of course you got to have a good plan. See, but I think the planning process provides significant residual impact, positive unintended consequences on the surface. But when you dig down deep, you start to see that planning is a phenomenal vehicle to gain a whole bunch of other stuff that fits into everything we've talked about so far and helps us get more done with less. Not just the effectiveness of the plan, but the process for building the plan. The process for building the plan, the approach that we utilize for planning. So, over the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about some real nuts and bolts stuff. Everything from how do we set up a room, to the kind of questions we ask, and so on. Now, maybe you're great at facilitating a dialogue. Maybe you're great at getting people to give you opinions and ideas so you can build a great plan. That's awesome. But how are your direct reports? In other words, just like we want to be an organization that is able to gather thoughts, ideas, and concerns, or build pride, or be outside-the-box thinkers, and we want to have that all the way down the line of command. And just like we want to be an organization that can delegate all the way down the line of command, in my opinion, you want to be able to build an organization that utilizes or is able to get the best ideas to build effective plans. And I think the only way to do that is the engagement approach to planning. Okay, let's look at look what Socrates says. By far the greatest, most admirable form of wisdom is that needed to plan human communities. By far. The greatest, most admirable form of wisdom is that needed to plan human communities. And I don't think he was just talking about towns. I think he was talking about bringing people together in a sense of community. So let's go through the self-survey. I promote the importance of planning in the development and implementation of all initiatives. I advocate an engagement approach to planning as typically the best approach for getting the best solutions and most effective plans. I can facilitate the development of various plans, strategic planning, municipal sustainability plans, feasibility studies, organizational strategic plans, operational reviews, project plans, funding proposals. Now, you might not need to do that yourself. You might have people that do that. But look what it says, facilitate the development. Well, isn't that just giving it to my direct report and having them come back? Just hear me out the rest of our time. Maybe it's a little bit deeper than that. I apply a diverse, sophisticated set of facilitation models, skills, and techniques. What does that mean? That means you can walk into any room with any stakeholder group and facilitate the building of a solid plan. And whether that's walking in with the town council or your commissioners, walking in with business leaders, walk into any room and be able to facilitate the development of a plan. I can apply strategies for igniting and engaging others in the planning process. Next to that, write inertia. We talked about inertia when we talked about igniting the fire. Inertia, remember, is that physical law of motion that says something in place tends to stay in place. Something on a path, a trajectory, will tend to stay on that trajectory unless there is a more significant force applied than the one that's being applied today. That's why, practically speaking, you get this. Okay, everybody, we're going to have a little brainstorming session here. I want to hear some of your ideas. Okay, what do you think? What do you think we should do? And you get this. Anybody got an opinion? We'd like to get your feedback. Yeah, because inertia is in play. Now, I guarantee you, if you tell them you're going to take something away that they believe is theirs, you'll get some opinions. Because that will create a force, that external pressure creates a force that's greater than the one being applied today. Like in a community. Tell them that you're, bringing the road through their house, through their subdivision that's been there for 30 years. Oh yeah, there's no apathy. All of a sudden, there's no apathy in our community when you make that announcement. So what's my point? My point is that you have to know that. And whether that's within your department or in one of your divisions, and you want to try to implement something, you're going to have to ignite that process. And an engagement approach to planning is a good way to do that. No, as we've talked about before when we talked about mastering the power of change, no, they may not be able to dictate what we're going to do and why we're going to do it, but maybe they can have some say in the how, the plan, building the plan for the implementation of the thing they're not excited about. I can implement appropriate research tools. See, part of great planning is getting all the information necessary. That's why I always talk about Admiral Yamamoto. Admiral Yamamoto should have won in the Pacific at Midway and the like. He didn't. Why? Bad plan. And the only reason the plan was bad is because nobody went like this. Excuse me, Admiral, you know, there's some things that have changed here, and we've got some opinions, and we've got some ideas, and this is not a good plan. Now, thankfully, the world would be a significantly different place, I think. So, you know, glad that their plan wasn't very good. But it certainly wasn't due to a lack of resources or materials or of the like that he lost. I can apply strategies for measuring outcomes, impacts, and the process. Some of you already know what I'm about to say, so forgive me. But others of you, maybe you haven't thought about in these terms. Those are three very distinct things. I got to measure the outcome of what I want. I got to be able to measure the impact of that outcome, but I've also got to be able to evaluate the process that we used. That's three different things. If all you ever do is measure the impact, there's a likelihood that the process will begin to fall apart. If all you ever do is evaluate the process, but never look at the impact, then you're not going to get the result. You're not going to get the results that you want. So those are three very distinct things that have to be measured, have to be evaluated, have to be looked at. I can apply a variety of facilitative techniques to assist in the development of a vision, of a purpose, of values, of outcomes, of strategies, of action plans, of budget. I want you to flip action plan and budget, because that's the way it should flow. Vision, purpose, value, outcome, strategies, action plans, budget. I work off of a zero-based budget. Not all of you have the opportunity to do that. But I work off of a zero-based budget. Here's what we want. Critical path to get there. How much is that going to cost? As opposed to, we got this much money, now let's build a plan. Well, you have to, Ian. In tough economic times, we're only allocated so much amount of money. Yeah, but I would suggest that as long as you put the outcomes and the potential impacts in the forefront, you'll find a way to take the limited resources that you have to get to that. At least it's been, to some degree, my experience. Okay, where did you score yourself on that? Where did you line up? Some things I want you to consider now about the process of planning. So this engagement approach to planning. It's self-evident we should have great plans. But I want you to think of these 5 things that maybe you haven't considered when you start to think about tapping into the collective intelligence of others. The engagement approach to planning, in other words, getting as many people involved as possible, builds self-reliance. I need to get people to be self-reliant, not robots. I need people to be able to make decisions on the ground. I need people to be able to execute without coming to me. Now, we already talked about in delegation, you have to mitigate your risk and what they can do on their own and what they have to come talk to me about and what's in between. We had that discussion. But the engagement approach to planning, getting other people involved in the planning process, fosters self-reliance. As an executive leader, I would strongly ask you to thoughtfully consider, filtering all policies and procedures through, does it support self-reliance or will it ultimately detract from self-reliance? Will it foster people doing it on their own? Or will it foster people being reliant on someone else? As we have to do more and more with less and less, we must have a culture that fosters self-reliance. One person's not going to be able to watch 3 people. those three people are going to have to work independently and still produce the same results to the same quality levels that we would have set as a standard. So, self-reliance can be fostered in this engagement approach to planning. Self-determination. If my wages have been frozen, if my benefits have been cut, I'm feeling pretty victimized. I'm feeling pretty abused. And whether I am or I'm not, I don't know. I bet you, though, you'd be feeling that way. So any level of say that we can give people and help foster a sense of self-determination, I have some control of something, is good for you as a leader. If people sense that they have some level of self-determination, they're less likely to freak out. They're less likely to throw a fit. They're less likely to attitudinally disengage if they have a sense of self-determination. Well, the planning process is a perfect vehicle for that. Just like when we talked about implementing change. No, I'm sorry, you don't have a say in what we're doing, the why or the what, but because you have great expertise and knowledge, you're going to have a say in how we do it. Self-determination. Self-esteem. Effective planning processes build self-esteem. Well, how's that? Because the line employee or the mid-level leader sees their idea or their recommendation or their suggestion in play. And when they see it in play, what does it do? It raises their self-esteem. Ownership and future innovation. When I'm a part of the planning process, I'm not going to let the process fail. when I'm part of the planning process, I'm not going to let that plan that I put together fail. Because it's a reflection of me. Remember when we talked about gathering thoughts, ideas, and concerns? And we talked about grabbing the best of the thoughts, ideas, and concerns and then giving it to that task force, and then the task force does something with it? Remember when we talked about then sending out, when we talked about implementing change, we talked about that task list and that timeline and sending that out to all the stakeholders that might be a part? Why do we do those two things? Gain ownership. It's their plan now. So, same here. And all of this builds. So, I take a sense of ownership because you gave me a say and I don't want my plan to fail. Future innovation. At some point, as you begin to implement what we'll be talking about over the next 3 weeks, at some point, people start doing it on their own. People start coming forward with their own idea, with their own plan. You may not be able to do this, but I know some departments have. When the budgeting process comes around, they sit down with their line employees. They talk about the goals and objectives. They talk about what they hope to achieve. They talk about the budget that they have to work within, and they build plans to work within that budget. And they get the expertise of the people to help with that. Well, that leads to future innovation because guys are fully informed, or gals. And then finally, and we just talked about this last week, or this week, and I just mentioned it at the beginning of the broadcast, pride. The engagement approach to planning is a phenomenal way to build organizational and individual pride because I had a say. Every time you can give a person a say in what the heck's going on, the likelihood that pride will be built increases significantly. Every time you don't give a person a say, they feel like a robot, they feel less valued, they feel that they have no say or they have no sense of belonging. The engagement approach to planning is a phenomenal vehicle for self-reliance, self-determination, self-esteem, a sense of ownership and future innovation, and building pride. Okay, let's get into it. So, step number 1, collective intelligence. Now, this is not the Borg from Star Wars or Star Trek. Okay? It's not the Borg. Collective intelligence. It's also not communism or socialism. Okay? So don't send me an email. It's the simple, basic premise of this. Wow, I've got a lot of people in my organization that know what the hell they're doing. I've got a lot of people in my organization that have a PhD in what they're doing. PhD, 10,000 hours, 12,000 hours. They've got 10,000 to 12,000 hours, many of your employees, in what they do. They got a PhD in that job. So it dawns on me, and I hope it dawns on you, that I better ask them. I better ask them their opinions, their ideas. So write this down in that little on those lines there. Vocational expertise and operational knowledge. So they have incredible vocational expertise and operational knowledge. Well, if I've got a bunch of people around me that have incredible vocational expertise and operational knowledge, I should be able to build great plans. I should be able to build great plans. So if you're not getting great plans that are highly effective, it's the leader's fault. It's the leader's fault. Because you got a bunch of people around you that have tremendous knowledge, tremendous expertise at their chosen vocation. So the idea of collective intelligence is, I look out over all the stakeholders I'm responsible for leading and say, holy crap, I got a lot of knowledge. Holy crap, I got a lot of operational insight and wisdom. Holy crap, I got a lot of intelligent people that work with me and for me. Yeah, but they're not as high a leader as I am, so obviously they're not as bright. Well, there may have been a day and a time that might have been the case. Now, I don't think there was ever a day and time, but maybe, where the leader had more education, more insight, certainly more information. But today, the world has flattened. People are pretty savvy. People get it. Now, maybe that's the proliferation of information. I don't know. Well, then why don't they perform? Go back to our earlier discussions about the 3 reasons why employees don't perform. So I had to say to myself, and I'd ask you to say to yourself, what am I doing with all of that intellectual capital? How am I tapping into the collective intelligence? Because if I can find a way to tap into the collective intelligence, I will have great plans, comma, that people will be happy to implement. And that's the caveat. Not only will I have great plans, but the people will be happy to implement them because it's their plan. Marshaling human capital. So, that little comma, plans that they will implement, is about marshaling human capital. Now, you've heard me say this for weeks now. Leadership today is about being able to get people to move in the direction you want them to move. And you can't intimidate them into that. You can't threaten them into that. You can't scream them into that. You can't. That's not going to work today. It's not the most effective way to marshal that human capital. So when I think I got all this intelligence, I got all this knowledge, I got all this insight, I got all this wisdom around me, how do I get it and marshal it to go in that way together in alignment? Well, one of the things I got to do, and look at this little box here. A plan is a list of actions arranged in whatever sequence is thought likely to achieve an objective. A plan is a list of actions arranged in whatever sequence is thought likely to achieve an objective. Now you say, Ian, that's leadership 101. Okay, but if I talk to your leaders, would they get that? Have you taught them that? See, as the executive leader, you as the executive leader are evaluated on how well your people perform. And the person furthest away from you, how well they perform. Because they're a reflection of you, and the culture of your organization is a reflection of you. So if your organization downline from you is not building effective plans 3 and 4 levels removed from you, well, that's a reflection of you. Then obviously you haven't taught them that. And you haven't instilled that. Well, where are they responsible? Well, they are responsible. But at some point, You've got to teach it. They don't just come with that knowledge in today's day and age. So how do I maximize the impact of collective intelligence, and how do I marshal that human capital? Well, for me to be able to maximize the collective intelligence, one, I got to realize I'm not the sharpest pencil in the box. I got to realize I'm not the brightest guy in the room. The moment you realize that there's other people around you that are sharper than you, even though they may be 5 levels removed from you, I think you take a big step towards being able to tap into the collective intelligence. Now, that doesn't mean they have your expertise. That doesn't mean they have your knowledge. That doesn't mean they have your life experience. That doesn't mean any of those things. That just means in certain areas they may have more of that than you. And isn't it in your best interest to get it? So leaders today that are open to that, and then transfer that openness into tangible, practical systems within their organization, are the ones that are going to be successful. I've said it to you before, but write it down again. Always in command, rarely in control. Always in command, rarely in control. If we really want to be able to take our organizations to the next level, then I have to be able to tap into the collective intelligence. And the first step in tapping into collective intelligence is me realizing I'm not the most intelligent. Me realizing that other people have great ideas. And so I have to aggressively and proactively seek them out. That other people have greater operational and insight and wisdom than I do. So I have to aggressively seek them out. We'll talk about a very tangible technique in doing that in just a moment. How do we maximize the impact? Information. The more information that we can share with our people, the more likely it is they'll use their intelligence to help us. The more likely it is that they'll give us an idea, an opinion. As I share information with them, as I explain things to them, as I show them the depth and the breadth. Now, you're not going to be able to share everything with them. John Chambers, the head of Cisco, he said, shared leadership. There are some things that line employees are not going to be able to give an opinion on. Why? Well, because they haven't sat in the meetings that I've sat in. They haven't had the dialogues that I've gone through. They aren't privy to some of the information that I've had. So getting their opinion on certain things is a waste of time because they don't have all the information to give a good opinion. So for me, what I'm asking employees about, and I'm talking to them about, are things that they have deep knowledge in, that I may not have knowledge in. But it makes no sense to go to them to ask them their opinion or get their insight or get their wisdom around something they're not fully informed on. So let's be clear about that. As leaders, I'm looking to tap into the collective intelligence to give me insight and wisdom I don't have on my own. Well, I know how to run that. I did that 20 years ago. Yeah, but you're not doing it today. So it's probably third. To maximize the impact, I've got to have formal systems in place. Formal systems in place. Now, we talked about a formal system in the past. We talked about gathering thoughts, ideas, and concerns. Well, why is a formal system so important? Because then it's not left to chance, so that it can become a part of the culture. We do it all the time. Some departments I've interacted with across North America, all of a sudden they're bringing employees in and asking them their ideas. They go off to some seminar, they go off to some workshop, they're involved in some program, and the speaker talks about, or the presenter talks about, you got to get ownership, you got to create ownership amongst your employees, you got to ask their feedback and get their opinions and get their ideas and involve them and da-da-da-da-da. So you immediately walk back in and you start doing that. And then when everybody goes like this, you quit because nothing productive comes out of it. Well, you got to know that in the first few times, nothing productive is going to come out of it because they're not used to it. They don't understand it. They don't get it. In a moment, I'll talk to you about an entry point that we can utilize to get the process going. So it's an evolution. It's an evolution. And that's why there has to be a system for the engagement approach to planning. so that everybody goes, well, it's budget time. They're going to start having those meetings to talk to us. I've been thinking of some things that I'd like to share. Oh, it's time to plan our action plans. I've been waiting for this opportunity. I've got some things I'd like to share. As opposed to, I guess we got to go to some meeting. I don't even know what it's about. So that consistency of the system is critical. And then finally, celebration. Celebration. One way to maximize the impact of tapping into the collective intelligence is celebration. That when people give us ideas, when people follow the plan that they built, when people have success in it, we celebrate it. Because that perpetuates them wanting to do it again and again and again and again. So I've got all this operational knowledge around me. I've got all of this vocational insight and wisdom. I know that I can't take on the complex challenges of the day unless I tap into it. I also know that we're busy and we're lean and we got a lot going on. So I've got to have good systems in place to get that information. To maximize it, I'm going to have to share information. I'm going to have to inform them to a greater degree than I probably am now. So they really can give me some wisdom. It's got to be routine and regular so that they get used to doing it. And then when we have success in it, we've got to celebrate. If you're planning a year, sow some rice. If you're planning for a decade, plant some trees. If you're planning for a lifetime, educate people. Educate people. Your department, you want to have a thriving department, and you want that culture to sustain over a period of time, then you've got to educate your people. Educate them in these ideas of collective intelligence, having them give their input, building solid plans, so on and so forth. And that's within the four walls of your organization and outside the four walls of your organization. This idea of the community builder marshaling the human capital of their community towards the common goal of building a thriving community. And of course, public works and the infrastructure and the framework is what is the platform for that thriving community to happen. You've got to be able to tap into the collective intelligence of all citizenry. Okay, turn the page. Now, this is a very practical, nuts and bolts, something you can start doing right away. That's the entry point to getting people to feel more comfortable with giving their insight, giving their wisdom, giving their ideas, instead of sitting in that meeting like this. Okay? So if you're not using some kind of system now, and you're looking for a place to start, here's where I would start. Here's where I would begin. And I would begin with my direct reports. I would teach this to my direct reports first. And then I would get them to start using it. And then, once we've done that, over a period of time, then start calling people into big meetings and asking for their opinions, asking for their ideas, asking them to give input and budgets and action plans and things like that. But if you just turn on that faucet right away, people aren't going to participate because they're not used to it. So I call this tapping into the collective intelligence a practical approach. You could call it brainstorming. But this is a very linear 7-step way to come up with a good plan to solve a problem. Well, what about a budget? What about the first step is here? Get them used to being involved in building a plan. And what I would do is make it something relevant, a real problem, a real issue. I'd call in my direct reports, and I would teach them this 7-step process so that they can go use it with their people. The first thing is you got the people in the room, as you can see in your handout, is define and agree on the objective. What's the objective? Well, we've got this problem. We've got this problem. And this problem needs to be solved. Okay. We all agree? Yep, that's the objective. We've got to solve that problem. You might even ask them, well, what's it look like when that problem is solved? How will we know? How are we measuring that the problem is solved? And then you're going to say to them, okay, for the next 15 minutes, all I want to do is gather ideas. That's all I want. I don't want to judge the idea. I don't want to attack the idea. All I want to do is get your ideas of steps that we could take and things that we could do to solve that problem. And people are going to start giving ideas. And they're going to say, well, what about this, and what about that, and what about this? And then someone's going to say, well, I don't like that. And you're going to say, ha, we're not judging the ideas right now. We're just gathering them. And you take 15, 20 minutes and you just gather ideas and you write them all on the board or on the white paper or on the chalkboard or on the whiteboard or whatever it is. You write them all down. Now remember, why are we doing this? We're teaching our organization to tap into the collective intelligence. We're getting hundreds of people or 50 people or 1,000 people, depending on the size of your department, we're teaching them how to plan, how to give an idea, how to come up with effective ways to get things done. And we're using this as an entry point to eventually create a culture so that they can be involved in all the planning that we do to whatever degree that they could give tangible and real insight. And you say, well, there's some instances they can't. Oh, they're in the operation. They can always give us tangible insight, maybe just specific to their chosen vocation. Okay, now I've got all these ideas, and this is key, and this is different from other planning approaches or other brainstorming strategies. I've got to then combine and refine. Combine and refine. See, one of the reasons that brainstorming techniques and things like that don't work is people get caught up in who gave the idea. People get caught up in that was Joe's. Joe said that, and I don't like Joe, so I'm just going to be against it. So we combine and refine. We depersonalize any of the ideas or suggestions by combining like ones together. Before we analyze them, before we beat them up. So that when Jeff, there in the studio, he puts his idea on the board, we all start beating it up. It's like beating up Jeff. And so then Jeff says to himself, I'll be damned if I'll ever put up another idea. Everybody just tore me apart. So instead, we combine and refine to depersonalize the idea or suggestion. Once we've done that, then we can analyze and assess. So, we sit everybody down. We clarify what we're trying to accomplish, the goal that we're trying to accomplish, or the problem we're trying to solve. We then set a time frame. And in that time frame, we say to everybody, just give me your ideas. Well, this and that and that and this. Oh, why are you doing that? Well, we're not analyzing right now. Just put the ideas up. Idea, 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 idea. Then I take and I combine those into like ideas to depersonalize the idea so that when we go to analyze or beat it up or pick it apart, no one person feels attacked. Now, we've refined and combined. In that analysis, we might ask some questions. Now, what exactly was that? And what did that mean? And how would we do that? And so on and so forth. From that analyzation and assessment and analyzing the effects of each one of the ideas, we'll start to get some priorities. And we'll rank the best ideas and the best approaches. And we'll gain some consensus. And you'll be amazed on how quickly it happens because we've depersonalized it. And people will be like, yeah, I think that's step 1, and then that's step 3, and that's step 5, and they'll rank the best, and the next thing you know, you'll have a little list of the best ideas. And then from there, it'll be very easy to come up with the action and the timelines, like we've discussed in the past. It'll be very simple. It'll be very easy. Because you'll have great ideas up there. You'll be able to quickly organize them into some linear format or action steps and timelines. Remember, a plan is just a sequence of activities organized in such a way that makes most sense to reach a goal. So you've got the great ideas, you've combined them, you've refined them, you've analyzed them and thrown out the ones that don't make any sense, you've ranked and prioritized the best of them, and now you've attached action steps to making them happen and timelines to making them happen. Now here's the amazing thing. In 45 minutes, I've helped them come up with their own plan that they would find to be reasonable and effective and the likelihood of it being successful increases exponentially. Now my only job is to follow through. That's my only job, is just to follow through on the timelines and the action steps that they had articulated. But deeper and more important, what I'm teaching is self-reliance. What I'm teaching is problem-solving skills. What I'm fostering is a sense of self-determination. And when I do this with my direct reports, and I do it regularly and routinely, I then challenge them to do it regularly and routinely with their people. Once I've done this for a few months, then it'll be a lot simpler to bring people in a room and say, I need your ideas. Or, and I've seen this happen many, many times, what will happen is they'll just start coming forward with their contributions to the planning that they know is going on at the time. What kind of a problem would you pick to solve? Something that's intense, something that's real to them, and something that is low-hanging fruit and you know could actually be accomplished. Let's say, Ian, I notice here you put in the brackets identifying thoughts, ideas, and concerns. Yeah, because this is the nuts and bolts of how you can actually practically take the gathering of thoughts, ideas, and concerns and that task force meeting or any of those dialogues build the great plan for implementation. Look at what it says right there. Good plans shape good decisions. That's why good plannings help make elusive dreams come true. Good plans shape good decisions. That's why good planning helps make elusive dreams come true. In today's day and age, the complexity of the challenges that we face is overwhelming. In today's day and age, the multifaceted, complex issues, I would suggest to you, are not going to be solved by any one person. What I'm about to say may get me in trouble, but any one person that stands up and says, I personally have all the answers, is a fool. They're a fool. Today's leader, I think, today's effective leader stands up and says, I can get a bunch of people to help me solve a problem. And I have that leadership skill. Now let me show you. And then gathers the various stakeholders together. Facilitates through a process, maybe as simple as I've just described, a great idea. And everybody says, I like that idea. I like the plan to implement that idea. And because I helped build it, I'll go give my all to that. The likelihood of it succeeding increases significantly. Do you have that ability? Good plans shape good decisions. That's why good planning helps make elusive dreams come true. In your department, you're probably facing some significant challenges. You have PhDs all around you who can give you some of their operational insight and vocational wisdom to help you do more with less, to help you solve operational challenges. Well, no, Ian, if we just need a bigger budget. If we just had a bigger budget, that'd solve everything. Because I know what to do if I just have a bigger budget. Well, guess what? You're not getting a bigger budget. And you ain't getting one anytime soon. And you're probably not going to get a bigger budget again in my lifetime. You're probably not going to get, by a percentage-wise, a bigger budget in my lifetime. Now, if you do, gravy. But we should work off of the premise that things aren't going to get any better very quick. But because we're in a critical, an essential service, a mission-critical service, we have to find ways to get it done. We don't have a choice. The road and the bridge being safe and the water being drinkable and usable is essential. Now, whether other people get that or not doesn't matter. We get that. And yes, we need to advocate for more resources. And yes, we need to fight for more resources. And yes, we need to build the trusting relationships with people of influence so that we can get people that create that attitudinal shift towards the value and importance of what you do every day. Absolutely, we should do that. And you've heard me advocate that at the beginning of this program and frankly across North America, from the stage as a keynote speaker for APWA to small town hall meetings across North America. So there's no bigger advocate for you than me from outside your industry. But I also know that we better be able to tap into the collective intelligence of our people and come up with damn good plans to get things done. And I see that skill set sorely lacking as I travel across the country and as I travel across Canada and I travel beyond. This skill set, being able to get the best of people's ideas, being able to get and take those ideas and implement them in a budget, or implement them in a sustainability plan, or implement them in a feasibility plan. And I don't just mean the people within our four walls, I mean citizenry, business leaders, faith-based groups. Do I have the ability to marshal human capital? Yeah, but Ian, I'm a public works guy. I don't like all that. I'm quiet. I'm behind the scenes. I didn't sign up for all that. I get it. I understand. I've met you. And many of you look at your shoes as you talk to me. Please don't be offended by that. So I get that you may not be that. Unfortunately, the time has come that we need those kind of leaders. Now, what I do know about you is I know you know how to build a plan. You wouldn't be in the position that you're in. You wouldn't have made it to this level if you didn't know how to build a plan. All I'm saying is look at the approach the times require and the approach that will give you the greatest impact. And I think the times require public works executive leaders that know how to tap into the collective intelligence of many. The engagement approach to planning provides a vehicle for you not only to tap into the collective intelligence, but also build better plans. And not only build better plans, but foster self-reliance, self-determination, self-esteem, and pride. And the funny thing about it is, people will get it done. They'll get more done with less. All right, over the next 3 weeks, what are we going to do? Over the next 3 weeks, we're going to break it down into some very practical things. How do you set up a room in a public meeting to make it more conducive and less confrontational? Or for that fact, any meeting? Well, it's based on the objective of the meeting. And we're going to give you some recommendations how to set up the room. What questions do I ask? What are the planning questions to get the information that I need? Because I can't just do this. What do you think? Give me your ideas. That doesn't get you where you want to go. I got to ask very specific questions and so on. So we'll attempt to give you some tangible tools, just like this tangible tool. If you wanted to implement this, what I would recommend is follow these 7 steps. Watch this again, follow these 7 steps, and then sit down with your direct reports. Pick out a problem and put together a plan. And tell them, I'm teaching you how I want you to use your people to help solve problems. And then teach it to them. And then you guys do it. And they'll see how effective it is, and then they're more likely to go implement it. All right. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for the difference that you make. You touch every citizen from cradle to grave in a meaningful and tangible way. And I thank you for it. Take care, everybody.